Oh, oh, sorry. Also, to keep everyone aware that these roundtables get recorded. And just wanted to start off by saying how excited I am about this topic in particular because of my experience when I was a planner, um, looking to put in a couple of new bus shelters and was myself surprised at all of the considerations that go into putting in a new bus shelter. And I know it's a topic that comes up a lot. We care a lot about transit and thought, when you're talking about main streets and you want people to access your main streets by transit, and that of course you want to have good service, you need to have bus stops and of course that goes into talking about what our main streets look like and how they're accessible and so much so related that yeah, they're excited to jump in. So I've also just let everyone know to please keep yourself on mute if you're not talking. There will be plenty of time for Q&A and discussion later after the presentation. Absolutely. If you put your questions as you think of them in the chat while we go, then they're there for the discussion part. And then also when it comes that time, please turn on your camera and raise your hand so that we can have more of a meeting as opposed to just a presentation. We can actually have discussion. So to get us going, I am going to share my screen and just do a little okay, everyone can see. Um, Here we go. Uh, our Secret Life of Bus Stops is the name of our session today. And thank you very much to our sponsors. And doing this. Oh, it's not working with the share. Okay, so Rhode Island Commerce has supported our roundtable program. And this roundtable in particular is supported by the Rhode Island Department of Health, made possible with support from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. And I should to say that the contents do not necessarily represent the official views nor an endorsement by CDC or HHS or the US government. I also would like to make a special thank you to Rhode Island Energy for their support of our entire Main Street Rhode Island initiative. And if you are new to this, to the roundtables and you're wondering what is the Main Street Rhode Island initiative, we are trying to bring Main Street America's 4 points approach to Rhode Island, where our commercial districts through support by community groups and others, really get focus on all four elements that make a commercial district work as a place. And the point today being the design point, which is all things related to the physical environment. But of course, there are 4 total points, and our roundtables will over time address elements of all of these. So we encourage you to sign up for them. We do them once a month. So more information coming out all the time on our Main Street Rhode Island newsletter, which is separate from the Grow Smart Rhode Island newsletter. So if you are not signed up, please go to our website and do so. Super excited today to have John Flaherty as our guest facilitator. You all know him from his role at Grow Smart Rhode Island, which has evolved a little bit. And you may also now know him as part of his consultancy, the Green Street Associates. So he's here today to facilitate with our guest presenter from the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, Julia Evelyn, their long-range planner. So thank you to them. Thank you to everyone for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to John and get us going.
All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. It's so fun, and we're grateful that you're sharing your lunch hour with us to talk transit, one of my favorite topics. Um, so when we think about main streets and we think about transit stops and shelters are really sort of the gateway to a main street district. It's something that people, I think, take pride in as part of the fabric of the community, and we know that we have work to do when it comes to shelters, and that work is happening for sure. Um, we all want to have the most frequent service we can have with beautiful shelters at every location. And so for many of us, I think we would tend to think, well, that shouldn't be, I mean, on the shelter side, shouldn't be such a big deal, right? I mean, it's a shelter, and not necessarily, as will learn. Um, and so today we're gonna hear from. I'm happy to, I'm proud to introduce one of the real pros at RIPTA, Julia Evelyn, who's been engaged in this work. Julia is also, was an urban studies major. She understands the importance of Main Street and urban planning and how transit fits into that. And we're so grateful for her to share with us the work that she and her team at RIPTA are doing to both inventory all of the 3,500 plus bus stops across the state, looking at their condition and prioritizing them for what little funding that they currently have to be making these improvements. And I would say that of most state agencies, I think RIPTA has a reputation for really stretching a dollar, and they do it in the best way possible. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Julia.
Thank you very much, John and Julian. Let me just share screen and get set up. There we go. Can everyone see the screen? I'm going to take the silence as a resounding yes.
Yes. Yeah, we see it.
Excellent. Let me move my notes out of the way. Great. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Julia Evelyn. I am a long-range planner at RIPTA, and I work on projects related to basically RIPTA service in the long term. So what's the 10-year, what's the 20-year vision for RIPTA service? And a big part of my job is to manage our bus stop program, which includes developing a vision and goals for how we want to improve our bus stops over time and maintaining up-to-date information about our bus stops, and then also working with communities and other departments within RIPTA to improve our stops. Previously, RIPTA did not own or manage most of our bus stops. That was done through an outside ad vendor, and we know that over time those stops really deteriorated, and some of them are in really poor condition at this point. So now that we do have full control over those stops and those shelters, we've been working for the past year or so to develop the processes that I'm going to talk about today. And I just want to highlight that this is not just me. I'm here to help manage this process, but this is a really cross-departmental effort at RIPTA. We've got like 6 or 7 departments that are regularly involved in this work. So it's been a really great experience, a learning experience for us. So this is our kind of basics of our bus stop program.
Hey,
The,
Julia, I'm sorry, we only see a quarter. Are other
oh,
people having this same problem? No?
hmm, okay. Seems good. Sorry
No,
about that,
Caroline
Julian.
says, no, she says it's good. It might just be my screen. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Hope you can get that fixed. But in any case, yeah, our bus stops are the entry point into our system. Almost every person who's using our system is using our bus stops at some point, and we really do believe that our riders deserve high quality bus stops. And we know that even making small improvements can make a significant impact on the rider's experience. So our goals for this program are to improve the rider experience by making our stops comfortable, accessible, and safe, to strategically place amenities to serve the most riders in the highest need communities, and to maintain up-to-date information about our bus stops to help us make data-informed and rider-centric decisions. Sorry, I've got 2 screens going. um, so the thing that kind of underlies this program, and a big piece of developing the program has been collecting accurate data about our bus stops. As I mentioned previously, we didn't have much hand in managing our bus stops, and so now that we do, we need to go out and visit every single stop and collect information about it. Information like what amenities are present there, if there are amenities, what the visibility of the stop is, what the condition of the sidewalk is, are there navigable routes like crosswalks near the stop, things like that. So every time we go out to a stop, we're filling out a form and recording all of this information so that we can use that in our decision-making process. And we have over 3,600 stops. So we've been doing this basically with planning staff and interns over the past past 2 summers, and we're about 75% complete. And what we have found is that about 350 of our stops have shelters. So definitely some room for improvement there. We really want to increase the number of sheltered stops through this program. We also want to increase the number of stops that have other amenities like benches and light posts. Even if we don't place a shelter there, we know those are also can make a big difference for someone waiting for the bus. And then, of course, the stops. This is a good picture because it shows one of these sort of black shelters with the triangular ad box. As you may know, the majority of our shelters across the state are this style. These are the ones that are typically, in need of repair, and we really want to improve the condition of the amenities that we already have, like these shelters. So in the near term with the inventory data, we use that to make small changes. So, we'll replace missing signs, we'll update the stop information in our database, which gets sent out to, Google Maps, Apple Maps, Transit app, so that people have more accurate information as they're navigating our system. But this information also goes into our longer term decision making about, where are we going to place amenities? So we want to evaluate information like what the infrastructure at that stop is, if the stop is proximate to important destinations like schools or maybe hospitals, doctors' offices, and ridership is also a big factor, and factors like that go into helping us decide what amenities we would recommend at each stop, so that we're using our resources as efficiently as possible, and also trying to provide the most benefit for the rider. Another thing that okay, great, I can use the arrows. Another thing that our inventory data helps, our inventory process is helping us gather data on is shelter maintenance. So that's, safety maintenance, broken panels, broken glass, excessive trash or graffiti that needs to be cleaned. When we go out and inventory a stop, that's only a snapshot. So if we see issues like that, we obviously, report that and try to get those resolved as quickly as possible. But we also rely a lot on our riders and our supervisors and bus operators who report issues like this, so that we can try to keep our shelters in a state of good repair. When we are talking about stop improvements that are larger than regular maintenance, there are a few different avenues to go down. So we can install a new shelter at a stop that never had one. We can install, or we can rather replace an existing shelter with a new shelter. We can rehabilitate an existing shelter, or we can install other amenities like a bench or lighting, even if we don't install a shelter there. And I want to also note that anytime we make improvements at a bus stop, we need to make sure that that stop is ADA accessible. First of all, because that is a requirement of the ADA, and also because it's part of our project and program goals to make sure that our stops are accessible, that they're safe, and that they promote transit access and safety for all of our road users. I've sort of separated the following slides into the new shelters and the rehabbed shelters because they're really kind of two different efforts. Funding comes from different places. They're done totally differently. So first, I'm going to talk about new shelters, but when I say new, I mean we in about a year ago signed a contract with Tolar Manufacturing, who's a shelter vendor. So we now have a like menu of items that we can order from them. Um, and this kind of contract is really important for us just to be able to speed up the shelter installation process and also for maintenance. So we get a lot of questions about art shelters or sort of customizations to shelters. And, they're the art shelters that we have. We did have that art shelter program at one time. The shelters we still have are really fun and really beautiful, but they are a real beast to maintain. So any part that breaks needs to be specially fabricated and ordered, if it even still can be replaced. So with the new shelters, the Tolar contract, that just allows us to have standard sizes. We can have stockpile of replacement items so that things can be turned over a lot quicker. Alrighty. So this part I hope is not too, I hope it's interesting and not too technical. But there are a lot of steps that we have to consider when we're installing a new shelter. And I've basically created this checklist to help myself just make sure that I'm hitting all the points that need to be looked at. So the first step is just identifying the stop location and context. That seems really easy. Usually it is really easy, but sometimes you get a call from, a community member saying there really needs to be a shelter on Main Street across from Dunkin' Donuts. There are a lot of main streets and a lot of Dunkin' Donuts in this state, and so identifying the specific location that people who request shelters are talking about can be tricky. So that's one like really simple thing that you all can do to help if you're going to call us and request improvements at a stop. It's so helpful to really be specific about what are the cross streets. Is it the inbound or outbound stop? It's on the north side or the south side. And if you want to be extra, extra awesome, you can even go on Google Maps, Apple Maps, and click on the stop, and it'll tell you the stop name and a 6-digit ID code. That 6-digit code will make sure we are 100% looking at the correct stop that you have concerns about. So that's just one really simple thing. But hopefully that step is very quick. Then typically we check what amenities are there and look at all those factors that I mentioned before, like ridership and if it's next to a school and things like that, and assess what sort of level of amenities is appropriate for that stop. If we decide we're going to move forward with a shelter, then we also check the location for other planning priorities like STIP projects or upcoming service changes that we might be doing. If we're going to reroute the bus in 6 months down a different street, then obviously that stop maybe is going to be discontinued, and we shouldn't put a shelter there. We also sometimes reach out to the local municipality for local projects that might be happening so that we can bundle those projects so that, we're not putting in a shelter and then a year later it's getting bulldozed up because the entire sidewalk is being redone. And that helps us to save costs and also just like limit the amount of, I guess, like construction burden on the community. I think everyone has had that experience of like a jackhammer outside their window at like 6 a.m. So we're trying to limit the burden of that on the community as well. Let's see. Oh yes, and then we're going to also reach out to relevant stakeholders. So if it's on a state road, probably reach out to RIDOT. If it's on private property, we'll need to talk to the property owner and get permissions from them. Sometimes we'll speak with community organizations that have a stake in that stop. Maybe it serves populations that they also support. The municipality, of course, is important as well to make sure that they're supportive of the project. So we really, RIPTA is a guest of the roadway and of the sidewalk, and we don't have the power to kind of make unilateral decisions about what goes there. So it's really important for us to work with stakeholders and have kind of buy-in from those individuals. All right, once we do that, then we do a site visit. We look at what amenities we think are appropriate and what amenities might actually fit at that stop. So that might include thinking about a different style of shelter that is narrower and allows us to install it on a more narrow sidewalk, or maybe we realize we'll need to get an easement from the property owner. Typically, all of our new shelter installs are going to need a new concrete pad. So that's included as site work. And the reason for that is because based on the specifications of the shelters, they need to be bolted into sidewalk that is particular depth. And so typically, just to be safe and to make sure that the shelter is properly installed, we'll pour a new concrete pad. So then, assuming all of that goes well, we're like, yes, we can fit a shelter here. We're going to talk to the property owner about that easement. We need a new concrete pad. Then we're going to determine the cost. So RIPTA, as you know, Jillian and John alluded to earlier, we are, we don't have unlimited funding. We are trying to, stretch the funds that we do have to cover as many bus stops as possible. So a typical shelter installation cost might be like $20,000 to do. And sorry, that's not an installation. The cost of the specific amenities. That would be shelter, bench, and lighting in that shelter. So that's probably around $20,000. It could vary depending on the size of the shelter and if there are other amenities that you're adding. So typically we do reach out to stakeholders to see if we can share those costs. It's not by any means a requirement of doing a shelter improvement, but it's something that we ask about just so that, if we can split costs half and half, then maybe we can do another improvement at another stop. So, talk internally and with stakeholders about cost sharing. And then we also need to determine if there are permits or approvals and what that timeline would be. So the funding that our new bus shelter funds come from is federal funding. Anytime we do a project with federal funding, we need to do NEPA permitting, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. So that is looking at, does this project impact, green spaces, wetlands, historic preservation? There are a lot of pieces that go into NEPA. I would say that is, if all goes well, a several month long process. Could be longer if if the stop is in a sensitive location or if there needs to be more conversation or evaluation. Sometimes municipalities have approvals that you need to get to change to do construction, to change the right of way on the sidewalk. So even installing like a bench potentially, depending on the town, could be something that we need to get the city council to approve or file something with the city clerk. And then, of course, MOUs, memorandum of understanding, that's something that we would typically sign with a municipality or a property owner to agree that, we're going to do this work and this is how much it's going to cost. And if they can, contribute anything, then that would be determined in the MOU. So that could also be, it really, really depends on the project. Could be really quick, a couple of weeks. It could be a months-long process of figuring out, who specifically is going to do what aspect of the project. So that's all the planning stuff. Then we get into the actual sort of like installation. So once we know what amenities we're going to order, we submit the order. Shelter lead times right now are quite long. So typically we're expecting about 6-month period for the vendor to fabricate and ship us the shelter. In that time, we also have to do site design and engineering and construction and installation. Those are two separate processes. They're both I would say typically several months long, assuming there are no unforeseen delays because we, public agency, we go out to bid, and have a contractor do that work because we don't have that capability in-house right now. So going from here to there, I mean, I would say a year is would be like a we'd be pretty happy with that timeline. And we've spoken with other transit agencies, and they all say the same thing, that it's just a long process, can be quite expensive. I mentioned cost over here. So the amenity costs, like I said, could be around maybe $20,000. Then the cost to do site design, engineering, permitting, construction, installation. You could get one, bus stop improvement with a pad, shelter, bench, and lighting that could cost like easily upwards of $30,000. So I don't say that to say, oh no, it's so difficult to do bus shelter projects. We should never do them. Of course, we should do them. We want to do them. We're working really hard to streamline this process, make it go quicker, and to come to agreements with other organizations, municipalities, to help us share those costs. We're also looking at setting aside specific funds for bus stop improvements. But I just tell you all this to explain this is like the inside baseball of why, if you give us a call about a bus shelter and then you don't see anything change there for a year, this is all the stuff that we're doing in the background. So the other option, oops, I'm going to pause this for a sec. Um, ah, sorry. Just trying to get rid of the suggested videos. Um, the other option that we're really excited about is bus shelter rehabilitation. So this is kind of a new process for us. And basically what it entails is pulling our old shelters, specifically those, black kind of like large shelters with the triangular ad box, pulling those off the street into our body shop and totally rehabilitating the shelter. So fixing parts that are broken, fabricating new panels for them, giving it a full like sandblast and repaint. I'll play this video in a second, and our body shop guys will explain more about what they're doing with those shelters. But I think this is a really, I think this is going to be a really good program to help support our new installations, especially for stops where maybe maybe this wouldn't be the first choice stop for a new installation. Maybe the ridership is, not super high, or it's not, as close to important destinations as other stops, but there's a shelter there and it's in a state of disrepair. And this is the kind of project that we're hoping to do at those shelters. It's also, I'll just say, significantly cheaper than the new shelter installation because we don't have to do any site work. Site work's already done. Shelter's already been installed there. And we don't have to do the design and engineering. And this is, more of like a preventative maintenance project. All right, I'm going to play this video real quick.
You might need to actually go in and share audio with your,
Oh,
yep, from your
oh,
setting.
sure. Sorry about that.
I think you have to
Not
stop
sure how to do
sharing
that.
and then reshare. And then when you
Gotcha.
reshare, there's a little button that says share audio, and you click that button.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Still new to this. Aha, share sound. Great.
Meanwhile, thanks to everyone for all these awesome questions in the chat.
All right, are you seeing it now? Is that working? Not playing yet, but
I think so. Yeah, I see it.
okay.
Okay.
Great.
such disarray
Good.
that they needed to get rehab and refixed. They're actually a poor representation of what RIPTA wants to be. So we wanted to beautify them. We wanted to make them structurally better because there was a lot of damage to them, and we also wanted to make them commuter friendly. It was a joint effort with our management and the crew, and we're planning on actually doing all of them. There are 315 of them of this type, which need to be redone. So it's an ambitious project. We had to pretty much sand them all down to bare metal because most of the paint was just flaking right off. And then it was just cleaning it up. We had to do some patchwork, new metal fab, and then just get them painted. Seal the roof back up because all the silicone was gone. We built that, with the plexiglass, keep the weather out for the riders, and that was it. Yeah, they also purchased a sandblaster for us, so we'll be sandblasting from here on in, which is going to save a lot of time. We're really impressed the way it came out. Yeah, we like the paint, we like everything about it. We've learned a lot, so from here on in, we're going to do much better, much faster, and yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Alrighty. Yeah, so I think it's a fun video, and I think I'm particularly excited about this rehab replace program that we're developing because I think it's going to really measurably and much more quickly improve the rider experience at existing shelters, and also help us get more years of use out of our infrastructure. Um, so far we've completely rehabbed one shelter. We learned a ton through that process. We have another one in the shop now that we're starting work on, and that rehab shelter should go out. I have to check with our uh, project management team, but should go out in the next week or two. And then, following that, ultimately, we're expecting the pace to pick up quite a bit. So, we'd have them shelters in and out within a couple weeks, and I think our goal would be for, maybe about 2 shelters a month. So that is a pretty cool new program that we're working on. All right. Thank y'all for sticking with me. This is the last slide. This is just an FYI to keep an eye out for some of our upcoming projects. So we've got 13 new shelters. Those are the Tolar shelters that we're planning to install across the state in 2025. So those are going to be popping up in Providence, Pawtucket, in Woonsocket, and there's one in Bristol. We'll also have plans for some additional stops to receive, just a bench and a freestanding light or wayfinding information to kind of improve that riding experience as well. And then, we're already planning for next year's construction season. So starting now, a year-long process, that gets us into 2026. And then, yeah, keep an eye out for those rehab replace projects. We expect those to ramp up in the coming year as well. All right. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions and share more.
Julia, that's great. Thanks so much for such a complete presentation. Yes, we have lots of questions in the chat, and I'm gonna start to present some of them. But I wanted to start with more of an orientation to how shelters and the space around them are being maintained and it's changed, right? So it used to be that the advertising company, I think it was Lamar that did the advertising they used to have the responsibility for doing the maintenance and the cleaning, but you've all since taken that in-house. When did that happen? When did you bring it in-house? And is the maintenance that you're doing? I noticed after the last snowstorm, for example, that I noticed shelters, there was some clearing of snow around the shelters, and I wasn't sure if that was a function of RIPTA or the municipality that was doing it. And if you can just shed some light on how that's working now.
Sure, yeah. So, yes, you're right that previously when Lamar was managing the shelters that they had placed, they were responsible for doing maintenance. Since we have taken ownership of those shelters, we do cleaning through contract, and we have our maintenance and buildings and grounds folks do kind of standard maintenance on shelters. We are hoping to bring all of that cleaning in-house at some point, but right now we just have really limited staff. So in terms of snow clearing, we do typically clear snow at all of our shelters, not unsheltered stops, unfortunately. But yeah, I couldn't say for those specific ones if that was RIPTA or the
Yeah.
municipality, because we do, also get assistance from property owners and municipalities. But our goal is to, yeah, just have a little bit of a quicker response and more improved maintenance of our shelters.
So Holly was asking about what the space requirements are for being able to accommodate a shelter in terms of the 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 square footage and so forth. I dropped into the chat your most recent bus stop design guide. But can you speak to that beyond the guide? Is that in the
Mhm.
guide?
There is some information about that in the guide. The design guide is a little bit more focused on placement of stops and operability. Space constraints for shelters depends on the size of shelter that you order. So we have got like 8 foot, 12 foot, 23 foot, and then larger, 34 foot for a transit center. But the 8, 12, and 23 foot length shelters are what we would typically put on a sidewalk. So depending on the like length of space that there is, that would help determine what size of shelter would be appropriate. We also need, I don't know off the top of my head, so I can follow up if that's helpful, but we also need the sidewalk to be a certain depth because, as I said, anytime we do an improvement on a step, it needs to be ADA accessible, so there needs to be a navigable path around it. So those shelters with, the ad box or sides to the shelter, which help, protect from weather, are sometimes not possible to place if a sidewalk is quite narrow. So we do have what's called a cantilever, which is basically just a back panel and then a roof. So we are placing a couple of those in narrow locations. But yeah, I would expect that you'd need, for a regular shelter, at least 8, maybe 12, 15 feet to be able to place that shelter on the sidewalk, and it would need to be deep enough as well.
So for people who are present, and this question came up as well in the chat, but for people who are interested in trying to get a shelter in their neighborhood or along their main street, can you speak to opportunities for sponsorship, for example? And I know that there are two that I'm aware of that come to mind. One is a private one, which is a builder, a home builder, Penrose, that built an apartment complex in Providence that was really eager to have a shelter, and they approached you all, and you've had some discussions, and you've figured out some innovative ways to share cost. That's one example on the private sector side, but then there was also um, the Central Providence Opportunities has the health equity zone that met as a neighborhood to do some participatory budgeting, and I believe that they allocated something on the order of like $253,000 to be able to make improvements at bus stops in the 02908, 02907 district. And I'm just curious how that all works on your end. Are you seeing more companies that are coming forward and saying, we'd like to make an investment? Or are you hearing more from grassroots groups like some of the health equity zones that may have some resources to leverage?
Mm-hmm. I would say it really varies from project to project. So yeah, those are two great examples. Penrose is, yeah, working with us to provide transit passes to their residents, and we're able to, create a nicer bus stop, improved bus stop near their development. And Central Providence has, as you said, had participatory budgeting funds that they allocated towards bus shelter improvements, bus stop improvements, and we've worked pretty closely with them to identify the specific locations. Another example is in Woonsocket. We kind of serendipitously were reached out to by both a local organization and by the city to ask about bus stop improvements, and we're able to have come to an agreement with them where their DPW is able to do the site work for us, so that really lessens our installation cost, and we're providing the amenities. So it really varies from project to project. And in some cases, like I said, we really appreciate and we are excited about these partnership opportunities. I don't want people to feel like that's the only way that a bus shelter will be installed or improved. But it is definitely helpful for us. And it also provides, I mentioned that local or municipal or state buy-in. If you have someone who's working together with you on a project, then that really helps to advocate for that project to a city council or to a mayor or working together is really helpful to kind of not legislatively, but logistically move that project along.
So, as part of the the inventorying project that you've been doing over the last couple of summers, that's accounting for the conditions of bus stops and shelters. And I know that you all have some advanced technology on buses, because the one question was raised about, are you also inventorying for the places that are most in need of bus shelters? And so can you speak to that in terms of the how you're able to count the volume of people that get on or get off at a given stop and how that drives some of the decision making?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Um, yes, so we have technology on our buses, a couple different ways actually to count ridership. We have what's called automatic passenger counters. So they are these devices that track, basically bodies as they get on or off the bus. So we can tell not specifically, not about like specific people or who's getting on and then off where, but we can just tell the number of people that are getting on or off at any given stop. And then we can also use fare box data. So when you pay for your fare, if you're using Wave or you're swiping a card that your employer gave you, that gets tracked as well and accounted to a specific stop. So, I think I think that data is very helpful in determining, whether improvements at a stop would benefit a large number of riders. That definitely encourages us or indicates to us that that might be a good stop for improvement. In regard to locations that don't have bus stops, I'm not sure if this was the exact question, but we're only really able to inventory bus stops that do exist. So if there's a location that doesn't have a bus stop and you think it would be beneficial there, then definitely reach out, and that would go through our service planning team, who's responsible for placing the location of bus stops.
So Chris from Bike Newport was asking about, had two questions. One was about whether you're beginning to incorporate bike parking at certain bus stops or bus shelters. That's one. And then the second is a perception that there's, at least in Aquidneck Island along East and West Main Road, that there's a lot of stops that are in close proximity to one another. And was asking about this idea of, of consolidation. And I'm pretty familiar with those stops along East and West, or at least East Main Road can be quite dangerous because the access to them is anything but ADA compliant. In some cases, you're talking about a hill that's just it's grass and a sign on a post. I realize that's not it's not your doing. It's you're working with what you've got there. But if you can speak to those two issues, that'd be great.
Definitely. Would you repeat the first part again?
Well, the first part was about incorporating bike parking as part of bus stops.
Yes. Um, yes, we do have a bike rack as part of our shelter amenity contract, so that's pretty easy to order. It is typically not part of our, like a standard bus shelter improvement, which would be a shelter bench lighting, but it's definitely something that uh, partner organizations and stakeholders are interested in, and we provide upon request or when we think it would be, really beneficial because we know that there's a lot of bike use at a particular stop. That's another thing that we also track, by the way, is when the bike rack gets put down or up. Um, so we know, where people are getting on with bikes. Regarding East and West Main Road, yeah, these are really tricky issues to address. We know that our stops there are not accessible, and in some cases, not particularly safe locations. We, yeah, if we were to make a stop improvement there, we'd basically be pouring a new concrete pad, and that would make a space for that stop, which is good and a benefit. But then, if there's no sidewalk, it doesn't really go anywhere. And so that's the part that we're trying to partner with RIDA and with some of those municipalities to address. But it's definitely something tricky. In terms of stop spacing, we do have guidelines in our bus stop design guide around spacing of stops in different contexts. So like a rural context, an urban context, what the recommended distance between the stops is. So we're always kind of evaluating that. And if we feel like that there's a particularly long distance between two stops and maybe there's a new housing development going up, then we would certainly add a stop to serve that location. Or sometimes we do remove stops if we feel like they're really close together and not really having a high ridership. But those are, again, decisions that go through our service planning team who, yeah, addresses the location of bus stops.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I know we still have a lot of questions, and I'm happy to get through them, but I also don't want to be dominating this discussion. So I would invite anybody who would like to ask a question yourself, go ahead and raise your hand, and Jillian well, you can unmute yourself. But why don't you do that? And in the meantime, I'll bring up another question that came from Marta Martinez from Latino Arts, Rhode Island Latino Arts, and it has to do with we talked about the art shelters, and we know the difficulty in having very individual shelters, and I know that she had some experience working with the city to incorporate art into a shelter, and I think she had some challenges with that. And Marty, you're welcome to raise your hand and speak to that. But I'm wondering if even the more conventional shelters offer opportunities to incorporate art. I know, for example, that you all are working on a commemorative shelter that will go by the State House in honor of Rosa Parks, civil rights leader. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about how art can be more incorporated into all kinds of shelters.
Hmm. Yeah, happy to speak to that. Was that Marta? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, it was a while ago, but I think the question at the time, it sounds like things have changed. Is well, I had to go through RIPTA, I had to go through the city, and then we had to go through the art. So there was all those questions, and then we had received a grant, and we built in money for upkeep, the shelter. So it took almost over a year to finally get through everything, and then it got damaged, and we wanted to go back and fix it because we had put money aside, and that started the process another year, and it just became so frustrating. The shelter never got fixed. It looks awful at this point, but I just wanted to address that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that context. I'm not specifically familiar. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that specific situation, but I would say in terms of art in our shelters, right now, I think because we're still developing this program and trying to just get all of the logistics in place. We're really focused on functionality over optics. We want the shelters to look good, and we think that they will look good. In terms of incorporating art, though, yeah, we do run into issues where if it's, maybe like an etched glass panel on the back, that panel gets destroyed, then you have to go through the whole process of either replacing it with a regular panel or getting a new artistic panel. So yeah, right now I think we're just really focused on trying to make the shelters as functional for the rider as possible. And yeah, I think the art conversation is ongoing. Regarding the Rosa Parks dedicated shelter at the State House, yeah, that is kind of a special project. It's taken like 2 years to get through the planning process. So adding artistic elements also does add some time. You have to, work with an artist and, like as Marta said, set aside special funds for maintenance and all of those pieces as well.
So I'm going to call on William next, but before I do, I want to make a couple of commercials. One is for 3 p.m. today at the State House. There's going to be a press event unveiling a package of legislation, proposed legislation that would better fund RIPTA. So for those of you who are in the proximity of the State House, I want to encourage you to stop by and learn about those and show your support. And the second commercial is we are hosting, in collaboration with the Providence Foundation, a transit forum on April 10th. And I've just put the link to that in the chat. And William, I knew you had a couple of questions in the chat. And since I see you visible there, if you'd like to go ahead and ask them, please do.
I think the main question that I would ask is, are there any state level or city level bureaucratic requirements that people like us could push on our elected officials that would make your lives easier? Basically, like, how can we help you?
That is a great question. I might have to think about that and get back to you. I think having local support for projects, it doesn't necessarily make mean we don't have to go through those processes, but it does tend to make them quicker if, your city government knows that there are community members who really want this, then they're more likely to champion it. So I think that's the main thing, but that's a great question. I'll think on that further.
I'll add something to that, though, because there is a proposed legislation, and I'm going to try to get the bill number and post it before we end the call for something called the sidewalk bill. And it's come up before, and it has to do with responsibility for maintenance of sidewalks. And for those who follow this in some way, state law essentially delegates that responsibility to municipalities, and municipalities often delegate that through ordinance to the abutting homeowner. And that's for things like it's for snow and ice clearing, but the municipalities bear the burden, even on state roads, for maintenance and repair of sidewalks. And I know that RIPTA has been doing a lot of work through the SS4A grant, which is the Safe Streets for All, doing safety action plans, I think for about 31 communities, which is really a required step before the municipalities can file applications for implementation funding. You've got to do the safety action plans first. But I think that the sidewalk bill is one that, for folks who are interested in this, you might want to learn more about, because it's proposing that the maintenance function go back to the DOT along state roads, except for ice and snow clearing, which they would be exempt from. And it seems like that's a opportunity for some advocacy, because it's just when that chain of command goes from the state to the cities and towns to the abutting homeowners for clearing snow and ice, the compliance is really kind of spotty. And anybody who's had to walk through snow can attest to that. So I'll try to find that in the and post it. But any other questions that people would like to ask in the final 5 minutes we've got together?
I thought Bill Hollins had turned his video on. Does he have a question?
Um, this may be more than it stretches your topic a little bit, but I was wondering if, as you do all this inventory of the stops, um, are there other amenities or issues, whether it's with adjacent buildings or awnings or fences or other things quite near bus stops that can be addressed that will make a significant difference, even if a shelter isn't necessarily either possible or affordable?
That's yeah, that's interesting. I think I saw your question in the chat as well. So you're suggesting like, if a property owner put an awning over their store, then people could wait under the awning, things like that. Um, yeah, it's a really interesting suggestion. We haven't done that kind of outreach so far. I would say, focused on, you know, developing the infrastructure that we do have. But this is definitely going to be a partnership. And I think if there are stores, property owners who are, interested and willing to do that, I think it's a totally great solution.
Yeah, I'll point out if any of you are organized as local communities on your main streets, that is a role that a local group could jump in and fill, um, just in whatever capacity you are organized at this time.
Mhm.
I will turn to a question that was posted, or sort of a comment and a question from Jennifer about your experience having moved to Rhode Island from Guatemala about 2 years ago, and that last portion, I'd love to have you speak about this, but you are focusing on what can be done to reduce the long wait times for buses and improve the overall efficiency. I'm so glad you brought it up because this wouldn't have been an effective transit call if we didn't talk about this, because it is the number one reason that more people don't opt to use transit, because the lack of frequency and the convenience um, uh, makes it hard to compete with the car, frankly. And we talk about it because we know that we've got a state transit master plan that calls for almost doubling the level of service, the frequency, the hours, making it really work better for more people. It's been a real challenge to get the funding for that part of the implementation. Um, and I'd welcome your thoughts, because it's something that those of us who do use transit think about all the time.
Yeah, and John, I'm sorry to cut off Jennifer, and I will give you a platform in just a minute, but because we are coming up on time, I do just want to say real quickly, first to reiterate John's comment about the April 10th event focused on transit, where we can talk much, much more about the service. Um, to anyone who's interested in organizing locally to address this and all issues related to Main Street, please join us next Thursday at 12. It's our first virtual Main Street Rhode Island network meeting. So anyone is invited. Totally free, to a chance for all of us who are doing this work to connect, less specifically about a topic and more about the work of working in a Main Street. And so we're going to talk about making our case for Main Street organization funding at that time. So would really love to get lots of people there to weigh in on that. And then the next roundtable is coming up March 27th. So we usually do the fourth Thursday of the month, always at noon. We're looking at talking about facade improvements then. And April 24th, we're welcoming back our friends from the Connecticut Main Street Center to be talking about a day in the life of a Main Street manager. So should be really interesting to start thinking about how we might think about our work in Main Streets. So I know it's 1 o'clock, so I'm going to stay on. Jennifer is still here, and we're going to let you take us out with some further conversation. But everyone else, thank you so much for coming, and can't wait to see you next time.
Stay engaged. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Hi, it's nice meeting you.
Hi.
Yes, well, other than what I already shared, I am a photographer, and as I was in the bus, I was uh, I was thinking about a project, and I wanted to take photos of the people that uses public transportation because that caught my attention. And I guess I just want to say, if there is a way for me to be involved in any way, then I'm here. But there's nothing else I can share at the time. Just it's really good to be in this conversation because public transportation has been a great issue. So I cannot imagine. People probably would like to have the opportunity to be part of the conversation. So
Thank you, Jennifer, for saying that. And
Yeah.
I put my email in the chat, so please take it. Send me an email, and that stands to, is for anybody else. We invite your engagement, and we will find a way to put your photography skills to work. So please reach out.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone has, further questions, feel free to, John, you can share my email or you can forward along things that you receive. We're, yeah, happy to keep this as a dialogue.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for all you do at RIPTA to make improvements. It's so much appreciated.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye.